Welcome back, y'all. I am Jennah Sears. I am thrilled to be with you today. I am your favorite Texas realtor. I'm also the host of this very show, the Come Home with Jennah podcast. I am so excited to share with you what I have today. We are going to look at the last quarter of 2022, and we're going to check out some predictions. I am sure you and I are both seeing the same news. And the big buzzword that we're all seeing a lot of right now is that we are in a shifting real estate market. We're going to talk about what the heck that means, why it matters to you, and what is the data behind that statement? Because I think there's a lot of fear right now because of that. And I would hope to take some of that fear away from you. The other thing we're going to discuss today is inventory, as well as new construction trends and inventory there as well. Inventory is always a major indicator of the health of the market. So when it swings in one direction or the other, we want to take note so that we can build a strategy around the current market conditions. And that is what this show is all about. I want to give you the information so that you can make the best choice for you. And that's really what my job is as a realtor in general. My job is to make sure that you're educated, you know your options, and that you make the best choices for your finances. So let's get started. All right, shifting market. You've heard it, I've heard it, we've all heard it. What is a shifting market? First and foremost, a shifting market, I don't even like the verbiage because the market is constantly shifting because it takes into account every sale of every property in a specific area. Stats change every day. So here's something that I'm always looking for and what the industry as a whole is looking for. So we're going to check on the numbers for expired listings. What is an expired listing? So when you are looking for a home or when you're looking through any website with homes listed, they are going to have a status. So the status that we are looking for expired is actually expired. So these are homes that have been listed by an agent. They have been on the MLS. And for some reason or another, the home didn't sell within the time frame that the listing agreement stated it needed to sell in. So that is an expired listing. Now, we always want to pay attention to these because they happen in every market. But if there is all of a sudden a quick uptick in the amount of listings that are expired, meaning they're just not being sold, they're coming on the market and then they're leaving the market with the same owner, we want to take note of that. The next thing we want to look at is a change in the number of offers. So around this time last year, my listings were receiving in excess of 20 offers. That's a lot of offers. It's a ton of paperwork to go through. And that number remained fairly consistent. I don't know, it's been about a year. However, we saw a shift in that as we hit spring, and we really saw a shift in that as we hit summer. So I'm still having listings that have multiple offers, but now instead of 20 offers, we'll have 2, 3, 4, which that's a big shift. So that's another indicator in how the market is shifting. The next number that we want to look at is the absorption rate. So this is the number of months that it takes for homes to sell. And we also want to know what a healthy market is. So traditionally, you are in a seller's market if the absorption rate is around 4 to 6 months, and you're in a buyer's market if it's any longer than 6 months. Even just saying 6 months is kind of giving me some feelings because I, like everyone else in the industry, we're becoming more accustomed to homes going faster. So it's a nice reminder that a home selling in 6 months is still considered a healthy market, and that's an okay time frame. So we're going to look at expired listings, the change in offer number, absorption rate, and days on market. So days on market, and if you're looking at the MLS or you're looking on another website, you'll see it says DOM. And what that means is the number of days from when the house went active and was available to purchase until the seller chose and executed a contract. So that number of days is days on market. Now, if we see a swing in those, that's definitely something we want to pay attention to. So what does this mean? How is this affecting North Texas? How is this affecting the U.S.? And why does it matter to you? So when we're talking about a shifting market, we really want to pay attention to the number of offers that each listing is receiving. Recently, because there was such low inventory, and we'll get to what that means in a second, I was very used to making a giant spreadsheet for each of my sellers, entering each one of their offers in, each one of the terms across the top, and it was just a process. And my sellers were a little bit overwhelmed, but in the state of Texas, we have to present every single offer that gets submitted. So that's what we were doing with my sellers then. Now my sellers are not seeing 20 offers that they have to go through. They're getting between 2, 3, maybe 4. Now, there are a few sellers I had that were excited and looking forward to that 20 offer scenario, hoping that they would be able to make more money, obviously. And the fact that they held off until the end of the school year to sell meant that they weren't going to receive that many offers. So it was my job to help them adjust their expectations and really understand that there's nothing wrong with not receiving 20 offers. That is a little crazy. And that's an indicator of an unhealthy market, really. So it's all about adjusting your expectations and making sure that when you are talking to your listing agent, that you ask those questions. How many offers are people receiving right now? How long should it take? What are days on market? And that brings us to our next indicator, which is days on market. So days on market is the number of days between where a house is listed and when the seller accepts or executes a contract on that home. So anytime there's a swing in that, we want to pay attention. And typically the number of offers and the days on market are very connected. So in any market, you could receive multiple offers. But if you want to be able to make the best decision, then you need to know what your current market looks like so that you understand what is reasonable and what is unreasonable. All right, so why are we seeing less offers? Why are we seeing a few more days on market? All of this really comes back to inventory, supply, and demand. So what does inventory mean? Because I feel like that is something that we all hear a lot of too, especially when we're hearing shifting market. So inventory just means the number of homes currently available for sale. So when it comes to inventory, let's zoom out before we zoom in. So in the United States right now, inventory is up 30.7%. That means that last year at this time, there was way less options. So if you were looking to buy, your competition was high because the inventory was low. And now we're seeing a swing in inventory going up, which means that there are more homes to choose from. And you are likely going to have, if you are purchasing a home, a longer period of time to decide if you want to put an offer in on that home. So this is very exciting because the fact that there's more inventory, days on market are a little bit higher. That doesn't affect the value of your current home. So just because your home is sitting for longer than a weekend, it does not mean that there is an issue. It does mean that there are less buyers and there are more houses available. So there's a little less competition. So why would there be less buyers and more inventory? How do we get into a situation like that? So when the mortgage rates bumped up, it changed the amount of financing that was available to the buyer pool. Some buyers, understandably, were exhausted. I have a buyer who we've probably written 10 offers for. And over the past year, their interest rate for what they're pre-approved for has just climbed up and up. And that means that they can afford less and less. Now, that doesn't feel great. So it's a good time for that buyer to take a break, reassess what they're expecting to get for their budget, and make sure that it's a good fit for them. So last year, if the rate was 277, they might have been able to afford a $400,000 house. But today, if their rate is at 6%, they might only be able to afford a $300,000 house. And that is definitely a shift for that buyer. And it's also going to be tied to a shift for sellers because they need to understand that the value in their home is there, but they're not going to get 20% over that list price. So what does all of this inventory talk mean? With more inventory, higher rates, and some buyers taking a step back or potentially pausing their entire home search, this does allow for competition to slow slightly. So this is excellent news if you are one of those exhausted buyers, because instead of having to compete against 20 other people that want this home, you probably only have to compete against 2 or 3 or maybe none. And I am seeing a lot more offers come in at sales price than I am seeing come in substantially over sales price. I'm also seeing some very unique things being written into contracts that we just weren't seeing a year ago. So I have a seller, let's say my seller from last year, they needed a 2-month lease back. A lease back is when you sell the home and then the seller essentially rents their previous home, the home they sold, they rent it from their buyer. So 60 days in general is a crazy amount of time for a lease back. But my sellers were seeing buyers who were able to give them that time to move out and to lease back that property. And also they had time to find a new house to live in because the competition was so steep. In this market, because we have shifted a little bit, I'm seeing more reasonable lease back offerings. So maybe my sellers will get 1 week of a complimentary lease back instead of 60. So that really changes the strategy. And it really helps you put into perspective, okay, if we've sold our house, we're not going to have 2 months to hang out at that house that we just sold for free and find another one. So it puts a little bit more pressure on those sellers to really finalize their plans, know what they're going to do after their house closes. And that is going to affect the offers that they in turn are writing. So if they have to purchase another house, then they might ask for some different things and they might not be able to offer a very long lease back to the owner of the house that they are going to purchase. So everything's very connected in this housing market. And the interesting thing about DFW is a lot of my clients are either staying within the same city or they are moving within the county and sometimes within the state. So it's not just people that are moving here from out of state. It is people moving within the state that is also affecting what the market is and what that inventory is. So if you were going to leave the state as a seller, you put your house up for sale, you're not buying into that same market in that same location. And that, it complicates things a little bit more and it makes the data a little bit more fun to go through. So that's just one of the factors. Because there are less offers that are coming in right now, and because buyers are exhausted and their affordability is a little bit down than it was even 6 months ago, the offers are less competitive. So I am seeing everything in Texas is negotiable in a contract. So somebody's got to pay for what's called an owner's title policy. 6 months ago, I was seeing buyers, they were just paying for that. That was just part of every standard offer. Another thing that I was seeing is what's called an appraisal waiver. So there is a document that Trek put out, and you could essentially say that it doesn't matter what the appraisal comes in at. The buyer is going to pay the difference. I am not seeing appraisal waivers on every offer anymore. In fact, I have a house under contract right now where there was not an appraisal waiver. The interesting thing and the balance to that is that on that same house, the appraisal met value. So that means when the lender's appraiser came out and looked at the house and decided how much it was worth, that number was equivalent to the sales price. So these are just some indicators of what we're seeing in the market. This should help you know how to speak with your buyer's agent. These are some questions you should ask. Are you seeing appraisal waivers? Are people using those? Are they giving long-term complimentary leasebacks? Are you seeing shorter options? Are you seeing an option period at all? There wasn't an option in a lot of these deals that were happening previously. And I am seeing healthy option periods come back for buyers to be able to do their due diligence. So with the market shift, it's not scary. It's not terrifying. The world is not ending. It just means you have a little bit more time and you'll have a little bit more data to make a really informed decision for yourself, whether you are buying or selling. The next thing I want to talk about is new construction. So new construction here in DFW, really all across Texas, has been, insane. Half of my business was new construction homes, and it has been for probably the past 3 years, which is wild. What that indicates to me is there just weren't enough houses, and there was a lot of demand. I read this stat and I was floored because I knew we had a lot of new construction, but I didn't know this. Texas was the number one state issuing housing permits since May of 2006. The number one state issuing permits to build. People want to live here. And I think a lot of people got nervous with the pandemic and they were kind of fearful to continue building at this rate. But with mortgage rates being so low over the past few years and supplies being more expensive, we had some issues. So at the beginning of the year, all of these new home builders were backed up. There were so many of them that weren't even allowed to sell. They just couldn't keep up with the demand. That has settled. And the price of lumber has finally stabilized and it's dropped. It was sky high last year. Imagine how much lumber goes into building a new home. What did that do to the prices of those new homes? It made them so much more expensive to build. And that's not profitability. That's just the material fees skyrocketed. So that definitely had an impact on pricing. And remember, even in new construction, unless you're paying cash, there will be an appraisal. So those houses with those lumber prices had to meet value. And I think that was something that we were just seeing a lot of. Nobody knew. And then when all of those appraisals started coming back, and because prices jumped so much, I think a lot of people felt really good about building new. Yes, it takes a little bit of time, but you can pick your finish out, and these houses are worth every penny you're paying for them. So I think a lot of people got really comfortable with that idea, and then they were disappointed when they weren't allowed to purchase new construction. Those days are behind us. I've probably had 6 builders call me over the past month and tell me they have spec homes available. They can sell custom again. You can pick your finish out. For a long time, you kind of just took what you got because there weren't enough homes and there weren't enough options. So that is shifting. Permits are down and they're building slower. So I kind of want to go into the areas that this is happening, because if you do happen to want to live in Texas or you want to move to North Texas, I want you to understand some of the cities where new construction is plummeting versus where it's growing. So it's just so fascinating to me. So if you look at the suburbs, I'm going to pull up a map, guys. You will see that there's DFW, boop, and then there's all of these northern cities that have a lot of land. So between here and Oklahoma. And those cities have grown exponentially. There are tons of new developments. There's just a lot of new construction. So if you wanted a brand new house a little further outside the city, maybe you're working from home, maybe you don't have to commute every day, maybe that makes a lot of sense for you. So that's the reason that people were driven a little further out, especially with so many people being able to work from home. So that's why you're going to hear a lot of these city names, and they're just right outside Dallas-Fort Worth. So Salina, down 42%. Frisco, down 36%. McKinney is down 30%. And this is all data combined by Tomlin Investments. And they look at all of the numbers as far as new construction in Dallas-Fort Worth. Home permits are also lower in Princeton, Littletown, 23%. Prosper, down 19%. And Anna, down 3%. So definitely not down 42%, but, it's a percentage point. Now, which cities are seeing more construction happening? Sherman, 85% increase in permits being pulled. Denton, 43%. Van Alstyne, 24%. Little Elm, 14%, which is really interesting to me because of how much Little Elm's already built out. And then Melissa is up 10%. So it's just really, where do you want to be? What type of house do you want? And what kind of inventory is there? Because we have to look at inventory from existing homes, and we have to look at that inventory of new construction. That's hard sometimes to get data from, because the only way that a new construction home is going to be on the MLS is if the builder puts it on the MLS. So we just saw a 17% jump in new homes being listed on the MLS. Now, most of these are spec homes. So these are homes that are already built. The plans are done. They are very close to being finished, or they at least have permits pulled, supplies are there, and they can sell these homes. That is not going to count any of the custom builds, anything that a client goes in and chooses the finish out. That typically doesn't end up on the MLS. So the fact that we're 17% up in new construction on the MLS really shows us that there's a ton of inventory out there. So as a buyer, you have options. As a seller, you have to be very smart with your strategy on both the buy side and the sell side, because nobody wants to be that house that's sitting on the market and eventually goes expired. That is a stat I promise you do not want to be. Thank y'all so much. I know this was an informational doozy, and we went over so much today. We talked about inventory, what that is. We talked about the market in DFW in comparison to the rest of the state and to the U.S. market as a whole. We looked at why the words shifting market shouldn't just inspire fear, why we should be educated on what that means, and what kind of data goes in to the shifting market title. Hope this was helpful for you guys. Do not forget to like, subscribe, listen along, and send me some mail, y'all. I want to hear from you. Thanks so much. See you next week.